YouGov, who tend to be quite reliable on their data reporting, have done their first poll on voting intention since the general election last year. And as you can see here, 26% intend to vote Labour apparently, Reform get 25%, Conservatives 22%. No surprise there with the Tories. I expect them to get worse. They're basically ran by liberal boomers who still think it's 2010. They need to get rid of Badenoch or beg Farage for a coalition at this point. Labour, I can't quite believe they're still in the lead. I just guess that goes to show there's a lot of people who like watching their country get wrecked, or at least brainwashed out there. But Reform UK are in second place, only a percentage point behind Labour. You'd probably expect them to take Labour Party over by the time 2029 comes around, because Keir Starmer's first year has been absolutely appalling and is likely only to get worse. So it seems the Reform strategy is working, and it's working big. Of course, Farage isn't playing to the traditionalist types like me, who would see him as someone too close to the neoliberal system, but then he doesn't want to. He wants to try and ingratiate himself that bit more with the mainstream, so he's all the more electable. It's also worth mentioning the Reform MPs, who I think have done quite well. I don't know much about James McMurdoch on the right there, let me know if you do down below, but Rupert Lowe has certainly been sounding the horn over the grooming gangs issue and gained a lot of support by doing that. Richard Tice, he may not be the most charismatic person, certainly not as charismatic as Farage, but he does have the air of a mainstream politician, a bit like a Nick Clegg type figure. With that, Lee Anderson is obviously representative of the northern working man, working class bloke, and I think he comes across very well. And then there's Farage himself. Now, whatever people think of him, you have to accept that he is quite an astute and capable politician, and he does have an ability to read the room. That's why I think he's been quite quiet on lots of the major issues: grooming gangs, mass immigration, multiculturalism and so on. I would assume he's living by the old military strategy maxim that's attributed to everyone from Sun Tzu to Napoleon Bonaparte, but is nonetheless just as true, reading never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. So as Keir Starmer lurches from calamity to calamity with his trademark emotional coldness and total inability to connect with the British public, while Kemi Badenoch seems totally out of place at both the dispatch box and as a stateswoman, from a political strategy point of view, Farage is probably right to lay low, play it simple and let the Tory and Labour parties screw it up. However, there's another thing which I think has gone in Farage's favour that many people overlook. In fact, some people have said has not gone in his favour. This was, of course, the issue around Tommy Robinson and Reform. Farage said he didn't want Tommy Robinson to have anything to do with Reform, and that upsets his supposed backer, Elon Musk, saying that Farage wasn't strong enough to lead. Now, this seemed like a massive challenge to Farage's authority, but it's actually played right into his hands. You have to remember that many people outside of the online right don't really know anything about Tommy Robinson, and their view of him is largely garnered by the BBC. That means that they view Tommy Robinson as some Hitlerian style figure who just wants to genocide any group that isn't white. Now, of course, this isn't true. Tommy Robinson is something of a Zionist, but Farage will know this isn't about truth, it's about perceptions. After all, Farage is once in the same place that Tommy Robinson is now. By this, I don't mean in prison. I mean that Nigel Farage 10 years ago was seen as the, quote, far right, and the Tories were more than happy to call him a racist and evil and keep him on the fringes, as it made them look more acceptable to the political mainstream. It seems that Farage is using the same strategy with Robinson, and that means that once progressive academics like Matt Goodwin, who've turned into intellectual cheerleaders for Reform, will use liberal polls to reference how Farage is succeeding. Here's a poll Matt Goodwin used recently from the More in Common think tank. It states that out of all people polled, only 12% think it was the wrong decision to not allow Tommy Robinson to join Reform. Now, when you look at Reform itself, only 21% of their voters apparently think that it was wrong to not allow Tommy Robinson to join. The Green Party is polling at 20%. Now, personally, those numbers seem off to me. It may well be the majority of Reform voters agree with Farage in that Robinson shouldn't be allowed to join, but only 20% are supportive of Robinson, 1 in 5. That seems very low. Now that got me quite curious, so I went back to the original report and started looking it up, and then I started exploring the think tank that made this, and as you can see, they're aligned with the BBC. They're essentially multicultural liberals. In their About Me section, they speak about how tolerance and diversity are our strength, etc, etc. Now, it's a harsh truth about political research that liberal think tanks tend to get liberal results and conservative think tanks tend to get conservative ones. Doesn't take Einstein to figure out why that might be. However, what's really interesting here is we have a liberal think tank essentially producing results which are beneficial for somebody like Nigel Farage. 10 years ago, this poll would have been something like, is David Cameron right to oust Nigel Farage from the Tory party conference, yes or no? This shows us how far things have moved in Farage's favour over the years. It really does go to show he might have a shot at number 10. These are just my thoughts, however. Do check out the Substack down below. Let me know what you think as well down below this video, and do subscribe if you know.